Survey by the Brenthurst Foundation has found that South Africa is more likely than ever to have a coalition government after next year's elections. The governing party's support dropped from 48% in November 2022 to 41% in October this year. Voters say joblessness, corruption, load shedding and crime are some of the reasons for the decline. Of the 1,500 registered voters who completed the questionnaire in October and November 2022, 80% said they were almost certain they were going to vote in light of the party seemingly losing support. The survey revealed that the multi-party charter made up of the DA, the IFP, the Freedom Front Plus, Action SA and the United Independent Movement and the ACDP are likely to get 36% of the vote. Let's bring in now the research director at the Brenthurst Foundation, Ray Hartley. Ray, thank you so much for making time for us. So we've looked at the people that you have surveyed. All indications are that we are in fact likely to see a coalition government next year. From the people you've spoken to, what is this study revealing about the potential performance of the ANC next year?
Yeah, I think we did a similar survey last year, Clement, about a year ago, and the ANC was at 48%, and they've dropped to 41%. So I think it's just, if you go back a year, we were just entering the heavy period of load shedding. We'd had load shedding since September for a solid month. So it was starting to reflect, I think, in public opinion. But this survey comes now after a solid year of pretty consistent load shedding. And I think that's been quite a big factor. I also think one of the statistics that we have is that the EFF has risen from 11 to 17%. And I think that a lot of the ANC supporters that perhaps identified with the RET faction or maybe jumping ship to the EFF. Ace Makashule is no longer with the party. The RET faction is very much, on the back foot within the ANC. So there could be a migration of support from the ANC to the EFF.
Okay. And speaking of the ANC and the EFF, what about that possibility of the EFF-ANC coalition? How are things looking?
I think that it is probably a stronger possibility now. The weaker the ANC's electoral support gets, the more likely it is to seek a single coalition partner that can put it over the 50%, because that just makes life a lot easier than dealing with lots of other different individual parties that may, for one or another reason, come and go. So the temptation would be to look at the larger parties and look for somebody that can put you over the top. So the EFF is certainly one of those parties. The IFP, with around 8% is another. The DA, there's not much friendliness between the ANC and the DA, and I think that's probably unlikely. But, those are the scenarios. So whether or not the ANC and the EFF can bury the hatchet and actually join forces is another question.
Yeah. There's a multi-party coalition which hopes to unseat the ANC. They're unlikely to get enough numbers to do so unless, of course, the parties that are part of this coalition record a miraculous increase in support at the polls. What did the survey find about the chances of this multi-party coalition?
Yeah, I think that the multi-party coalition went up marginally from 34 to 36%. That would be putting the votes of all the parties together that are part of the coalition. What's quite significant is that the spread between the multi-party coalition and the ANC has narrowed because of the ANC's declining support. So the ANC dropped to 41 and the MPC is at 36. So it's now just a 5-point spread. So, it becomes a lot more interesting then as we approach the election, whether that would narrow. Because, of course, the more that you have, to start out with, the more stronger position you're in to negotiate a coalition with other parties.
Yeah. And how do the voters feel about this multi-party coalition?
I think it's the idea of the multi-party coalition was to sort of offer some kind of hope rather than the petty bickering that has been going on amongst opposition parties. So I think it's done that because we see that 24% of voters said they were more likely to consider voting for an opposition party subsequent to the launch of the MPC. That doesn't mean that they will vote for an opposition party, but are perhaps thinking, well, maybe there is an alternative of some kind that has a bit of heft to it.
Mm-hmm. How is Cyril Ramaphosa ranking now in terms of favorability? What's his rating according to your survey?
So his rating has dropped from 48%, his favorability rating, from 48% to 42%, which is quite a substantial drop. So I think in the past, I think voters have viewed Ramaphosa as being somewhat different to the ANC and wanting to reform it and fix it. But I think the lack of production of results, changes in service delivery or electricity or crime and so on, has tarnished that somewhat, and he's starting to take on a bit of water. And then I think the unfavorability ranking has now risen to 40. So he's just got a +2, really, if you subtract unfavorability from favorability, which is a lot weaker than it was in the past.
Mm-hmm. Were the voters also asked about their views on our economy and perhaps even our associations with other countries in terms of what that benefit would be for us as a country?
Yeah, we did ask, on some, it's hard to ask everything in a survey like this because it's already a 15-minute interview, which is fairly substantial. But we did ask, if people thought that the private sector should get involved in service delivery. And that was pretty overwhelmingly yes, and that has grown since over the last year. And we also asked about South Africa's global alignment and whether it was better for the South African economy to be associated with the West and other democracies or with BRICS. And the answer there was pretty strongly in favor of with the West and other democracies, although BRICS did show up with over 20%.
Okay. Ray Hartley, thank you so much for making time for us.